The sleepy town of Willow Ridge, Virginia, hadn't made national news in decades. Tucked between slow-moving creeks and winding backroads lined with pine and dogwood, it was the kind of place where everyone waved, where church bells still rang every Sunday morning, and where nothing, absolutely nothing, ever changed. Or so it seemed. Officer Travis Monroe had patrolled these streets for nearly a decade. A stickler for detail, he knew every pothole, every leaning mailbox, every neighbor's dog by name. He wasn't one for drama, nor was he the type to expect surprises. He liked his town quiet, his coffee black, and his shift predictable. But on one otherwise unremarkable Tuesday morning in late spring, everything he thought he knew about Willow Ridge and about the nation would be turned upside down. The clock on his dashboard blinked 10:02 a.m. The sun filtered softly through blooming dogwoods as Travis sat parked at the corner of Maple and 3rd, sipping coffee that had long since gone cold. The dispatch radio crackled with routine chatter, nothing urgent. He was about to tune it out completely when a vintage car, mint green and suspiciously pristine, floated through the intersection without so much as a pause at the stop sign. A Buick Skylark? Travis muttered to himself, squinting. The car looked like it had come straight out of a museum exhibit, polished to a glow, the kind of vehicle that didn't just drive, but glided. With a sigh, he flipped on his lights. Not because he expected trouble, he never did, but because rules were rules. He eased the cruiser behind the Buick, and the driver obediently pulled over without hesitation. Travis grabbed his citation pad more out of habit than anticipation and stepped out into the warm morning air. Behind the wheel sat a woman who looked as though she had stepped out of a different era. Her silver-gray hair was pinned neatly beneath a soft hat the color of faded bluebells. A powder blue blouse with pearl buttons clung gently to her frame. She sat upright, composed, calm in a way that immediately unnerved Travis, not because she looked guilty, but because she looked prepared. "License and registration, please," he said, tone even. The woman gave a soft, knowing smile, reached into her glove box, and handed over the requested documents without hesitation. Travis took them, barely glancing down at first. But when he did, his entire body stiffened. Name, Eleanor M. Whitfield. Date of birth, February 22nd, 1938. He blinked. That name, it echoed in his memory, faint but persistent, like a radio signal beneath static. He walked calmly back to his cruiser, trying to place it. As he sat down, he typed the name into the department's internal database. The screen loaded, slow, glitchy, and then something strange happened. A red-bordered file opened, most of it blacked out by heavy government redactions. But the header was clear. Eleanor M. Whitfield, status, deceased, presumed. Classification, top secret. His breath hitched. The file had a date of disappearance, July 1972. The last known location, classified. Travis sat frozen, staring at the blinking cursor on the screen as if it could explain everything. Then his radio crackled. Unit 19, Officer Monroe, return to your vehicle immediately. Do not detain the driver. Repeat, do not detain. Await further instructions. He reached instinctively for his personal phone, heart hammering now, and dialed the only person who might know what the hell was going on. Captain Russell, he asked when the line picked up. I need you at my location right now. This isn't normal. 15 minutes later, a black SUV with government plates rolled up beside his cruiser. Out stepped Captain Russell Mays, usually unflappable, immaculately pressed in uniform. But today his face was pale, and his gait carried a strange urgency. He said nothing to Travis. He walked directly to Eleanor's window and offered a nod so small, so reverent, it barely registered. Welcome back, ma'am, he said softly. Travis watched in disbelief as the woman returned the nod with a weary smile, something between relief and resignation in her eyes. I suppose it was only a matter of time, she said, her voice clear, her southern accent soft and enduring. She's coming with us, Russell turned and said to Travis. You'll ride with me. Leave the car. It'll be secured. As they pulled away, Travis sat in stunned silence beside the woman who had, for all intents and purposes, returned from the dead. Finally, unable to resist, he spoke. Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, who are you? Eleanor turned toward him, not annoyed, not evasive. Just tired. I was a cryptographer, she began. Back in the 50s and 60s. Office of Strategic Intelligence. My job was decoding encrypted foreign transmissions. We were looking for traitors. And we found one. She folded her hands neatly in her lap. He was high-ranking. Trusted. I gathered enough evidence to prove he was leaking information to the Soviets. But the moment I reported it, things began to change. My home was broken into. My phone's tapped. One of my few allies told me I had a target on my back. So you disappeared, Travis said. We faked a crash, she nodded. July 1972. Bridge outside Richmond. My car went over the side. No body found, just some burned remnants. It was enough. I lived under aliases, changed locations every few months. I didn't even speak my real name aloud for over 50 years. Why come back now? He asked. She exhaled deeply. Because the people who tried to erase me are mostly gone. And those who remain? They don't scare me anymore. I have files. Tapes. Names. For decades I kept them hidden. But I believe now there's someone willing to listen. Someone willing to act. The SUV pulled up to a government compound Travis had never noticed before, even after years of patrol. It was tucked behind trees, built to be forgotten. Captain Russell opened the gate, and Eleanor stepped out, back straight, head held high. Later that afternoon, Russell pulled Travis aside. What you saw today, he began slowly, is part of something much larger than either of us. Eleanor Whitfield gave everything to protect this country. And for 50 years, she lived in silence to keep others safe. Today wasn't about a traffic stop. Today was history trying to speak again. And speak it did. In the weeks that followed, Eleanor's return sent shockwaves through covert sectors of government. Her handwritten notes, preserved on onion-skin paper, matched ciphers long thought unsolvable. Cassette tapes with recorded conversations filled in blanks left by declassified documents. Lockboxes found in abandoned storage units across 5 states contained damning proof of betrayal, of cover-up, of manipulation at the highest levels. The mole she had identified had died in 1991, but the web of influence he left behind remained tangled in places few dared to look. Eleanor's files began the slow process of unraveling it all, leading to resignations, hush-hush hearings, and internal investigations that would never make the news but would change everything from within. Travis returned to his usual patrols, but something inside him had changed. Every license plate he ran, every glove compartment opened, every stranger's eyes he met through a roll-down window, it all felt different now. He had glimpsed the edge of something enormous. And it had started with the smallest of things, a stop sign, a Buick, and an old woman with a name he'd once heard in a classroom. He thought often about Eleanor. The weight she carried, the strength it took to remain silent for so long. And more than that, the courage to finally speak. They said she was being relocated again. Some even speculated she'd vanish into another identity, this time with government protection instead of government denial. But Travis doubted it. After half a century of hiding, he sensed Eleanor Whitfield was done running. The last time he saw her, she was standing in front of a projector screen inside a secure federal conference room. Her hands rested on a thick manila folder. Her back was straight. Her voice was sure. She was no longer a ghost. She was a reckoning. And somewhere deep in the archives of history, stamped and sealed in a vault once marked classified, her story would remain, not as a footnote, but as a testament. Because some truths don't fade with time. Some secrets don't sleep. And some women refuse to be forgotten. And all it took was one question on an ordinary Tuesday morning. One more question. One more page. And the courage to open a file that refused to stay closed. But even as the government quietly worked to authenticate Eleanor's files, not everyone was ready to let the past see daylight. 2 weeks after her reappearance, the federal compound where she was being held in protective debriefing was breached. It happened just before midnight. A blackout, swift and calculated, took down the perimeter grid. No alarms. No sirens. Just darkness, and then a silent, surgical intrusion. Whoever came knew the layout. They avoided cameras, jammed frequencies, and neutralized the guards without a sound. By the time security re-established control, Eleanor's room was empty. The folder of documents, the tapes, the evidence, gone. The news hit Travis like a blow to the chest. He had been scheduled to visit her the next day. Instead, he found himself standing outside the same unmarked facility, surrounded by agents who refused to meet his eyes. They think she was taken? He asked Captain Russell, whose face was now locked in something colder than grief, dread. No, Russell said, jaw tight. She let them take her. There was no struggle. No signs of forced entry. She walked out of here with them. Travis couldn't believe it. Why would she do that? Russell held up a tiny device, retrieved from Eleanor's empty room. It was a micro-recorder, one that hadn't been in her possession when they last checked. He pressed play. Eleanor's voice crackled through the static. Calm. unshaken. If you're hearing this, it means I've chosen to finish what I started on my own terms. They were always going to come. I knew that. I waited long enough to know the rhythms of their fear, to understand their desperation. They think they're still in control, but they're chasing ghosts. Let them come. Let them remember what I know. I've left copies in every place they forgot to search. I've trained others to read what only I could once decipher. They cannot silence what I've already passed forward. I was the fuse, but I am not the fire. The message ended in static. In the days that followed, encrypted files began surfacing anonymously across multiple secure networks. Intelligence officers around the world woke up to digital drops, metadata leading to decades-old conspiracies, forgotten Cold War missions, and names no longer safe behind sealed files. A letter postmarked from Roanoke arrived at Travis's home. No return address. Inside was a single page. Don't search for me. Search for what matters. I've had 50 years of silence. Now it's your turn to speak. E.W. Asterisk. For a while, Eleanor's name flooded hushed conversations in Capitol corridors. An emergency Senate Intelligence Subcommittee was convened in secret. Veterans of once buried operations were quietly removed from public-facing positions. The Department of Defense released a rare statement acknowledging long-standing gaps in procedural oversight during a prior era, though no specifics were offered. But for those who knew the truth, those who had seen the files, what Eleanor unleashed was more than a revelation. It was an indictment. It was a reckoning. And it had only just begun. Travis, now quietly promoted and reassigned to an internal investigative task force, found himself reviewing more than just traffic logs. His days were now spent sorting through field reports, reopening archives once marked irrelevant, and decrypting messages that had been dismissed decades ago. Sometimes, he would still patrol Willow Ridge in the early mornings, watching the sun rise over the old dogwoods. Locals would wave, and he'd wave back. But behind every smile, every nod, he knew better now. He knew how the world really worked. He knew what a life lived in the shadows looked like. He'd seen it in Eleanor's eyes, the weight of secrets, the scars silence leaves behind. One evening, as the sky burned orange behind the hills, Travis drove past the exact intersection where it all began, Maple and 3rd. For a second, just a blink, he swore he saw that mint-green Buick parked by the curb. He stopped, got out, approached. But it was gone. A trick of the light. A shadow fading into memory. Or maybe not. Because some people don't just vanish. Some legacies don't disappear. And some names, like Eleanor M. Whitfield, become the kind of truth history can't bury, no matter how deep the hole. She had walked out of the darkness with nothing but her mind, her memory, and her unmatched resolve. And when the world tried to silence her again, she didn't run. She ignited a storm. The last whisper Travis ever heard of her came through an intercepted signal in a cipher only Eleanor used. It read, "The last code has been broken. The truth walks now, not in shadows, but in light." And so, in the end, the woman who once disappeared not to save herself, but to protect a nation that refused to protect her, didn't just return. She redefined what it meant to stand alone. She didn't come back to ask permission. She came back to make history face her. And history blinked. Because when the silence breaks, it echoes. Forever.